Welcome to another episode of Video Store Rejects. This is a podcast where we talk about directors' filmographies and our favorite film franchises. It's also our official first show of the new year. We've been doing some of our late night. We did a late night show Wednesday about all the Matrixes. You can watch that on YouTube or Facebook and Twitter. But we're back with our director series. We've been doing the whimsical world of Wes Anderson and the fantastical world of Guillermo del Toro. Today, we're back in the fantastical with Mr. Del Toro, talking Crimson Peak. And with me is returning guest Samantha Grace. Samantha, welcome back. Happy New Year. Hope you had a safe and wonderful holiday. And thanks for being back on the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me back. We had a great new year. I hope you guys had a great new year too. I am ready to jump into this. I've got a lot of thoughts and opinions that I want to get to.
Okay, well, great. I'm excited that you have a lot of thoughts and things to say. First off, are you a fan of Guillermo del Toro as a director or as a storyteller?
Both. I am a fan of Guillermo del Toro. So, overall, his movies are not my absolute favorite movies, but I think he's an exceptional storyteller. And I also think his style is unparalleled across his genre. He almost is in his own genre in a way, but like you can definitely tell a Guillermo del Toro film. Like you can tell it before you even know. You're like, oh yeah, this is a Guillermo del Toro film. So I think for me, his stylization is one of my favorite things about him. I love his stylization, and that's one of the reasons I love this film so much is because it is so precisely stylized.
Yeah, I know this movie's streaming on Netflix, but when Criterion was having their 50% off sale at Barnes and Noble, it's always around my birthday.
Mm.
They also started doing sales on Arrow Video. Arrow Video, if you don't know, or anyone watching, if you don't know, is, I believe, a UK based physical media Blu rays and 4K disc, and they do often obscure genre films. I don't think this is quite obscure, but the print of this is absolutely beautiful.
I need one of those.
Yeah, it was beautiful to watch. Like, I hadn't seen this movie since it came out in theaters. I was like one of the 20 people that went and saw it. And it is gorgeous. Like, and they built that house. Like, they built
Mm.
that house on set because Guillermo is very much as much practical as we can do. So I'm glad to hear you really like this movie because I thought at first you were like kind of just throwing me a bone, like, well, if you need a guest for this movie, I'll talk about it. But I'm glad you like it. So I want to start out with a question, and this brought up when I was watching it, talking about Mia Wood. Let me see how you say her name.
I know I have to write it out phonetically. Wazakowski. Yes.
Wazakowski. I feel like
Wazakowska. Sorry, Wazakowska.
Wowzakowska. I
Yes.
feel like Guillermo del Toro is doing the same thing Edith is doing in this movie, talking about the story she's written when he was making this film, when he was advertising this film, pitching it, and like marketing, and then even to this day. Yes, this movie has ghosts in it, but it's not really a ghost story. It's a
Nope.
gothic romance.
Mhm. Mhm. That's exactly what I wrote at the top. I even wrote the faults because this movie, as much as I love it, it also has its faults. It does. Like I can't talk about. Oh, nope, it's absolutely perfect without addressing like, no, it's got some issues. Not necessarily with the movie in the sense of, again, the style, the acting, which the acting throughout it is positively superb by everybody. There is no one miscast. Like it is a well made film, but it has some problems. And one of the things I wrote at the very top of my notes, it says the faults. The trailer made it look spooky and proper creepy, but it was more of a romantic gothic mixed with flowers in the attic. That was my first takeaway because I'm like you. I was one of the 20 people that went and saw it in the movies. because I remember the trailer coming out and I was like, oh my gosh, like the trailer hooked me. I was like, this movie's gonna be so good. I can't wait to go and see it. Holy smokes, like this cast is amazing. Jessica Chastain, Mia Wasikowska. We'll get it right eventually. Tom Hiddleston, like everyone was on my list of like thumbs up. I want to go see this. And I remember going in like, oh my gosh, I hope this isn't going to be too spooky because I love me some horror films, but I kind of get jumpy. I can kind of freak out a little bit. And the movie kind of starts off with a pretty big spooky jump, and I was like, oh no, this is going to be too much. But then as the movie rolls on, I was like, oh, this has absolutely nothing to do with ghosts. This was a false sale. Like, you sold me something else. This is not at all what I thought this movie was going to be. And I remember watching it, and after the movie was over, Sarah and I went and saw it. We were on the way back, and we're both kind of in the car, and we're both kind of like, hmm, hmm, okay. And it took me a little while to kind of put it together in my mind to be okay with. Well, it wasn't a horror film. It was something else completely different. And then once I kind of put that together, I was like, oh, okay, I do like this movie. This is actually what I wanted. I just didn't know that's what I wanted. So I think that's the huge fault that almost everyone who says I don't like this movie, I think that's it. That they didn't know what movie they were going to see.
Yeah, and I think that's more on the marketing than Guillermo del Toro.
Sure.
I think the marketing's like, well, if we market it as a horror film, people will go see it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Which and what's interesting is a lot of people, critics or film writers or people in the film community that really like this movie are from the horror community though. Like
Mhm.
horror fans like really like this movie. Like
Yeah.
they're the ones that's like, "No, this movie is like awesome. What are you guys talking
Mhm.
about?" So
Mhm.
it's so I find that interesting that it's not really a horror film, but the horror film people are the ones that kind of really like it, and it could be just because they love Del Toro's vision as a director and how he weaves a story, or you know, horror fans are diverse just like anybody else. They like different styles and tastes. They don't want just the same thing all the time.
Well, I think also because I was kind of doing some research on the film, and I think there's this ode to gothic horror. I mean, that's really what it is. It's a gothic horror. So those that are fans of the horror genre, they also pay respect to like the original gothic horror films and even gothic horror novels like Frankenstein, Dracula, all of these films that kind of came out in this romantic age, the late Victorian age. And then, they kind of get romanticized in a really weird way where, looking at them now, they're like, that's not spooky at all. But they're classic in the horror genre. And I feel like that's exactly what Guillermo del Toro was doing. And purposely. I mean, it's actually quite obvious that that's what he was doing. And there's even this great line where Edith, she has her book. She's taking it to a publisher to get it read to see if the publisher likes it. And someone makes kind of like this offhanded comment about her that maybe she might be like, I think it was Jane Austen, that she was going to die a spinster. And she, stops immediately, like, I think I would rather be Mary Shelley and die a widow. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, Edith, like, way to bring the noise on that one. And to be fair, that's really kind of interesting of a thought of like, I want to get married, but I also hope I die a widow. Like whatever that means to her. Like, yeah, I'll keep him for a little bit, and then that's over. But then again, what great foreshadowing for the entirety of this film. So he's already kind of setting the tone of this like love story for gothic literature and what's happening here, and even this woman trying to pioneer in a time that this is still a male-driven society, and that she feels that she needs to type up the manuscript so it doesn't give her away that she's a woman because her handwriting is quote unquote pretty, like it looks like a woman's handwriting. So she's like, if I type it and they don't know I'm a woman, they'll like it. We kind of get hints at that maybe this book does get published with the opening and with the ending. You know,
Right.
a monologue of like, well, maybe that is what it took to get to
Well,
that
and he opens us up after we get that prologue with the ghost with her as a child after her mother's death, and
point.
like it's a story. We're about to enter the world, and if you notice, like his transitions into the shot, like from one scene to another, which I really liked, and I think I didn't notice the first time, but like it kind of like is a keyhole to a door, like when it closes or
Hmm.
blacks out, and then we go to the next scene. For me, this reminds me of he hasn't listed this as a reference of gothic romance, but it reminds me a lot of like an Edgar Allan Poe story to me.
Hmm. Hmm.
But he listed things like Wuthering Heights, Jane Eyre, which Wachowski was actually in a version of that with Michael Fassbender that's actually really good.
Oh, I love that movie. I have it on DVD. I like it.
Which definitely leans into that gothic.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think you're right. People tend to forget that was, and it's still a genre, but I mean, look at Bram Stoker's Dracula, the
Oh
Francis
yeah,
Ford Coppola film. That's a gothic romance too.
yeah. It's an art class. Like that movie is an art class, and you can even see a little bit of that in this film, like the inspiration, like a little bit of that, like even just that gothic literature, kind of reviewing what we have as the tone before bringing into this film. And even in some of the stylization, you can see some of that. And even he quotes one of my favorite, they're so cheesy, but I love them, Hammer films. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of it's like, this is like, even I think Edith's last name is Cushing, and it's ode to Peter Cushing, who was in
Exactly.
countless Hammer films and what we would consider B horror movies or gothic movies. And so even right there, it's like, yeah, there's no denying where we are in this world. That it's we're definitely in a romantic gothic literature love story.
And I mean, he references horror films also as an influence, and I think it's kind of interesting we're talking about it in the middle of winter when this is kind of a winter horror film, like The Shining. But he also listed The Omen, The Exorcist, some haunted house films like The Haunting and The Innocents. Like he really wanted to make like a big studio, like, it's not really a horror film, but like a big studio spooky movie that we don't really get anymore because horror films tend to be low budget. And that's usually why they make their money back, is because they're low budget.
Hmm.
And it's kind of it, and comedies are kind of the only genres that play with a crowd anymore besides franchise movies now. Like tend to
Hmm.
be the only movies people like, well, I'll go see that in the theater
Right.
cuz. And I always feel like horror and comedy are kind of like siblings because they get the same reactions just in a different way. And the setup for a scare is the same as the setup for a joke.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because another thing I read is, and this is from Guillermo del Toro himself. He said the reason that this movie was a flop was because it was such a big budget. He's like, if we had made this film for 25 million or however much it was, and then we ended up making 79 million on it, well, then it would have been considered a success. But we ended up spending like 59 million on it, and it only ended up making 79. So then it turned around and considered to be a flop, but it was a flop just because our budget grew and grew, because he wasn't going to make just your average horror film. He was making a piece of art.
Exactly. And I don't know if it would have done better if it was pitched as a gothic romance, but yeah, it made its money back, but because we live in a world now where movies have to make nearly $1 billion, I mean, I guess I'm old enough to remember when when a movie made $100 million, that was a big deal.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was
And
like a huge success.
and now people are like, that's all it made. I mean, it cost 200. It cost 100 and it cost 95 million, and it only made 100. Ugh,
Yeah,
flop.
what a flop.
And, and we live in a society where if you don't do well your first weekend, that's the end of your movie. That's the end of it. Like,
hmm hmm And I think another thing that sunk this film was kind of again like what I was saying is we went into it thinking we were going to see something else, and then we left and we did enjoy it, but it took us a while to realize we enjoyed it. And I remember social media kind of hating this movie too. Like I remember a lot of people had very strong opinions about it. Like on that first week, second week, it was like, did y'all see Crimson Peak? It was terrible, and then no one wanted to go see it after that. So that's another thing I think that kind of squashed this movie quickly up front was even social media put the nail in the coffin, like when the first and second week of it being out.
which I hate that because a lot of times our initial reactions aren't how we feel,
hmm
whether whether it changes to good or bad, because it can happen vice versa. Like you can go into a movie and I'm like, I don't get it, and then you're like, you think about it or watch it again, you're like, oh no, there's actually interesting stuff going on. Or you can go into a movie and be like, oh man, that was really good, and then you're like, no, no, wait a minute. Actually, it wasn't. I was just wanting to like this movie so
hmm
much that I was
hmm
trying to talk myself into it, saying, "Oh no, that was good. It was good." So
Yeah,
yeah,
I've definitely been there.
but getting back to just Edith and her character, which I really like both the main female characters in this story, though I feel like they don't give Jessica Chastain much to work with, even though she decided she wanted to play that role because she felt like it
hmm
was more interesting. I like that even though her dad probably spent a lot of money on that really nice pin, that he's just supportive, even if he doesn't understand or get everything that she wants to do. Like, he's still a really good dad and I guess a progressive woke man for the early 20th century.
hmm
And like when she makes the comment, I think I'm gonna type, like, he's got that I just spent a lot of money on that pin, but if it makes you happy, okay.
Yeah, I think there's this kind of I think there's a lot of stuff going on with Edith and her dad because her mom died when she was little. So it is very apparent that she would have such a strong bond with her father just because he's been a single parent that whole time. So that connection, with the dad probably really wanting to dote on her because that's all he's got left. And then, he can do no wrong in her eyes because that's all she's ever known is, this strong, working, hardworking father who's built like a mini empire for himself. That I'm sure when her mom died, he was still maybe trying to build this empire. Like he wasn't the man that we know at the point that the story begins with grown Edith. So there's a kind of connection of him being a hardworking man, but then also being a family man at the same time. No one else is there to raise your kid, so there's a lot going on with that relationship, and you can even see that when they're having breakfast or dinner, where that scene is where they're like, oh Edith, I got you a gift, and all these great things that all come out, even with the unspoken things that are all happening in this scene of like how much we realize they rely on each other. In that scene is when we get that of they both need each other.
Yes, and at first, the actor Jim Beaver, seeing him in this kinda threw me off because I only know him as Bobby from Supernatural, but even though he's kind of in the aristocratic society of Buffalo, New York, of that era of America, he's a self-made man. So he's still kind of this blue collar person or blue collar thinking, even though he has reached the status of not. Like he goes to this private club to take a bath every day and shave, and which he just shaves part of his face because he has a full beard. So well, okay, but I think it just threw me off because it's a period film and he's wearing period clothing. But I'm like, okay, no, this isn't really a stretch for the type of characters he plays. And I've never seen the show Deadwood, but apparently that's why Del Toro wanted to cast him because of his character in Deadwood.
Yeah, that was what I was about to say. I've never seen Deadwood either, and I've never really watched Supernatural. Oh Lord, don't come for me. Um, so I really didn't know him. It was kind of this unknown guy, but I thought, he's kind of this a little gruff, hard around the edges. Gruff maybe isn't the right word. Kind of hard around the edges. Definitely a doting father. Um, Knows instantly, like at a snap, what he wants, what he likes, what he dislikes, and immediately he's already like, no, I don't want anything to do with Thomas Sharp. Don't like him. Don't want nothing to do with him. And he doesn't change his mind. Like the whole time he's like, I'll pay you money just to get you the hell out of here. I don't want you. I don't want my daughter knowing you. I don't want you in my town. Get out of here. So those are some very interesting things that we kind of see right off the bat from this man, that instinct of knowing how to protect yourself kicks in full throttle all the way from that very first meeting of Thomas Sharp.
Well, and I'm gonna equate that he's a good judge of character, and turns out he is. And
Yeah.
I think, and I'm gonna relate this personally because he's in is it construction? Construction is
Hmm.
his business. So he's
Hmm.
worked. He starts out as a hard worker. He's worked with a lot of men in manual labor positions. And that's something I think my dad, who worked a lot, worked his way up into not quite that status, but worked his way up to running plants and stuff as a manager. And I think working with a lot of men, especially, that's where they're judging. You kind of become a good judge of character from the type of people you're working with. Like you get a sense, like off the bat, oh, I got a bad feeling about this person. Because at first he's kind of being contradicting and like giving Tom Hiddleston a hard time because he comes from privilege. He's like, you got soft baby hands, like you didn't earn your way to where you are. Most of these men did. I mean, and then they make a joke about the lawyer, like, okay, maybe his living's not honest, but
Yeah. And I
but
think that kind of showcasing also this dichotomy of the two different worlds, because when I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit, but when we definitely get the sense of loneliness that Edith gets once she arrives to their house, to Lucille's and Thomas's house, because she's never been without someone like her dad, or there's even kind of like a maid-ish housekeeper character. But what's setting this up is he's setting up for like this kind of extreme loneliness that she has when she gets there to um, England. Like she's so far removed from everybody now. Even the people that still left, like Charlie Hunnam's character, I can never say his name right. Um, this the film of people's last names I cannot say. Even her friends, she's left everyone behind, and I think that this scene with her dad is setting this up for this kind of like extreme loneliness that Edith is going to have later.
I was just thinking, specifically with the casting of Wachowski. Originally, Del Toro approached Chastain for this role, but then Chastain was like, "No, I think the sister character is more interesting and will work more for me as an actor." They originally were going to go with Emma Stone for this, but
Mm-hmm.
conflicting. But not just Jane Eyre, Wachowski was also in a movie called Stoker, which is kind of a loose remake of Shadow of a Doubt. It's like the only English language Park Chan Wook movie.
Hmm.
And it's also got a little bit of that kind of vibe going on. So I think maybe just her as an actor is like just keen into this kind of material. So like as much as I like Emma Stone as an actress, I think this was a better casting choice.
I think so too, because I remember the first time I really saw her that she like stood out for me. It was like, oh, hey, who is this actress? was in another Tom Hiddleston film called The Only Two Lovers Left Alive. It's a
Oh
Jim Jarmusch
yeah.
film. And
So
so
good.
she was in, yeah, that's kind of one of those like weird, that was kind of the same type of movie. Like I watched it and was like, what the hell? What I see? And then I went back and watched it again. I was like, oh, okay, cool. I know what I saw. But it also has that like romantic, gothic tone kind of underneath it. And that was the first film that I saw her in, and I was like, well, damn, okay, I like this actress. And then saw her in Jane Eyre, and I was like, okay, love this. Like, this is a really good casting moment for her. And then when she was in this, I was like, this is perfect. This is absolutely perfect.
Yeah, so I can't imagine somebody else. I mean, she played Alice in Alice in Wonderland, which is probably one of the more forgettable billion-dollar made movies, but, you
Don't even
know,
get me started on any of that. I have opinions, but we're not here to talk about that because we will be here till next week if you get me started on the Disneyfication of Burton and Johnny Depp. And I'm going to stop right there because I'm already on it.
we'll save
And I'm
that for
irritated.
Tim Burton series.
Yeah, if you want to talk about somebody who's like, you want to talk about something I hate slash love, I have opinions. Okay, cool. No, it's good. But yes, she did play Alice in the fever dream that was the Alice film.
Yeah. And Tom Hiddleston wasn't the original choice for Thomas Sharp. It was going to be
It was
Benedict
Cumberbatch.
Cumberbatch, which he could have done this and he would have been good.
Hmm.
Um Apparently, I guess he wanted Jessica Chastain to play the other part as part of the rumor of why maybe he left. And I guess good for him that he wanted an actor closer to his age to play his love interest because it is quite a bit of age difference between him and Mia Wasikowska or Emma Stone.
Hmm.
And then I guess it's good when they went with a younger actress that they got Hiddleston, who's under the 10-year age gap. Like, it's still a big age gap, but not like, I guess, creepy age gap, I guess I would say.
Yeah, because not that Benedict Cumberbatch looks old. He definitely doesn't, but he is older, and it's kind of apparent. Like when I was reading that they were gonna, cast Cumberbatch, it was like, oh, I mean, I don't think that's a miscasting at all, but that age difference would have been noticeable. I don't think it would have been creepy, but I think it would have been noticeable. Where in this, it doesn't. It almost seems like Edith and Thomas are well matched. Like they're close to the same age. Um, and even why can't I say any of these names today? Jessica Chastain, even she is seems to be a better fit in the age as far as like the sister goes with Tom Hiddleston in that role. So I
What?
can understand how he could possibly be like, I don't know. I feel like this is kind of like wavering as far as like who you might get to cast the love interest.
Well,
Excuse me.
and
Excuse me.
Emma Stone's not like a child because she's not much younger than us, but, maybe like, because you mentioned Cumberbatch kind of feels like an old soul. I think she feels younger than she actually is. So it might have been like apparent, like, oh, there's.
Well, and it's kind of like we lumped Emma Stone into a kid category because this movie was made what in 15, I think 15 or 16, somewhere in there.
Uh
So at
huh.
this point, we hadn't seen Emma Stone really do a whole lot of, I hate to use the word grown, but we had kind of like lumped her into like Easy A, that kind of stuff where she played a kid or she played a teenager. So I can understand why Cumberbatch was like, well, if we have Emma Stone do it, does it then look like I'm marrying a child bride? Because we kind of only associated Emma Stone with those kind of roles at that point. And
Yeah,
even
this
though
is.
she's an amazing actress and she is much more than, a kid actor, it's just I can see where he's coming from of like if, I'm Benedict Cumberbatch and I'm very proper and I'm doing all of these things that Thomas Sharp would be doing, is it weird that is it like statutory rape now that I'm marrying this kid? Because that's what it would kind of feel like.
Mm hmm. Yeah, because, he's Sherlock Holmes. And And yeah, at this point in Emma Stone's career, it's before La La Land, so she's most known for Super Bad, Easy A, and playing Gwen Stacy in those Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, which even again, she's playing a kid. So all of these are younger roles that we just don't associate with her being an adult yet. Even though she is, we're just not there on board yet.
Yeah, and so I kind of respect that if that was the reason because, I think that's a huge problem and it's been a huge problem in Hollywood even from back in the day. Like they talk about like sometimes when a casting like the Zendaya movie she did with Denzel Washington, there's like a 12 age difference. Well, there's a 30 age difference between Fred Astaire and Audrey Hepburn and Funny Face. Like, so this
Hmm.
isn't something new.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm actually I'm very glad that it didn't happen because when I was reading and it was like, okay, Emma Stone and Benedict Cumberbatch, I think they're both excellent actors, and I even think Benedict Cumberbatch, had they recast with Mia Wasikowska, it probably would have been fine. Like I don't think that age gap would have been that apparent. I don't think it would have been that bad. But I just think that who I'm gonna say something kind of controversial, but I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna stick to it, so don't come at me. I think Benedict Cumberbatch wouldn't have let the suaveness that Tom Hiddleston has come through, which is I think something that role needed. That kind of almost cheeky, like that. There's that time where we get that they're falling in love, and he's like, "In my country, when we dance the waltz, you have to hold a candle, and if the fire goes out, then you're not doing it right." And it's kind of very like cheeky, tongue in cheek, and you could see all the women kind of like, "Ooh, dance with me," like they're getting all like, "Oh, Twitter pated," and he makes a beeline for Edith. And I don't know if Cumberbatch would have done that in
I,
such a cheeky way.
I agree with you, and I think part of it is we're used to Cumberbatch playing these tortured geniuses that are kind of arrogant and don't care about people's feelings and stuff. And like he's playing different types of roles, but that's mostly what we think of Benedict Cumberbatch is like this kind of socially awkward genius who like and I'm not saying Cumberbatch is not a handsome man. I'm sure many people find him handsome and he is an incredible actor, but Tom Hiddleston, he's Loki, so he's got charm, he's got the looks, he can be a little bit cheeky, like
Hmm.
and I think even though the age difference is less, like I think Hiddleston would appeal more to a younger person than Cumberbatch would.
Yes, I think Cumberbatch would have leaned more into the baronet portion of the story of like aristocratic, proper, where Hiddleston kind of leans into, he knows he's only using it as a title, so he has to use his wit and charm to get around it. Because even though the women are already like, oh my god, a baronet, he still then has to like lay it on thick so he can get all these rich women, which is kind of the whole thing that he's done. And so there has to be kind of a playful and flirtiness to him to make that work. Like the whole point of marrying these rich women and getting all their money, you've got to be smart and charming and witty to do that.
I also think it was wise of Chastain to chose the different role. I think if it was Cumberbatch and Chastain as Edith and Thomas, that would have worked. It would have been a more believable romance. And I get why Cumberbatch is like, well, if they're younger, I'm going to look too old.
Hmm.
But I don't think I could have bought. Chastain probably could have done it because she's an incredible actress, but I think there's more layers and things here for her to play with. Even though I feel like they don't give her a lot to do, I feel like there's just quiet stuff within her performance. And I don't know if I would have bought her as this young, naive ingenue like I think this was the better role for her.
I agree. I agree. I think she plays off of Tom Hiddleston very well. Like the two of them as siblings, I believe it. The two of them have a really great chemistry together, and it doesn't feel like ooh they're lovers. It's just you can there's a feeling of familiarity, and it does kind of their chemistry was really good in this movie. And that's one of the things I like so much about it is it forces Edith to be the odd man out, and you feel it. Like you actually feel that throughout the film, this closeness that the brother and sister have, and I think that's due to Chastain and Hiddleston because they're actually friends in real life, and so I can see that working so well in the film. Where I don't know if it worked quite as well with Cumberbatch as far as that familiarity goes and that kind of familiar feeling that you get with family that the two of that Hiddleston and Chastain have.
And I mean, it's a perfect example. I mean, not that most people have to deal with all this stuff because this is extreme and weird circumstances, but it does feel like when you get married into a family that's very tight knit and close, like you feel like you don't belong. You're like, well, I'm just an
Hmm.
outsider chilling out here. Like, they have a history and memories and inside jokes, and like they have a relationship that I don't think I'm going to have here with either one of them because I wasn't there for it. I didn't experience or share the things they've gone through.
Hmm. And then going into this again, kind of what I was saying earlier about this extreme loneliness. You know, she's marrying this baron, and they're going off to England, and they walk. You know, go up to this huge house, and it's kind of like something out of a storybook. And then they open the door, and it's so completely dilapidated, and it's falling down, and it's just leaves are falling in the middle of the floor, and you can kind of see it in her face of this like what the hell did I just walk into? And then,
Yep.
but what's so great is you know Thomas Sharp, Tom Hiddleston's character, is like, okay, so all these things need to happen. We got to redo the roof. We got to redo this, and we got like this is totally normal for us. I've lived here my entire life, and this is like our house, and it's Crazy Train, and it already the house seems to be against her. That already she's walking in, she's like, there's nowhere for us to be as a family. Like we don't even have a space for us. The house has even taken that away from us. So already there's this kind of you can see the disconnect that's already going to happen once she gets settled in. And she's almost like she gets allocated to the outskirts too. It's like, well, this is the one bedroom that still has a working fireplace, so you can stay in here. I live upstairs, but you can stay here on the second floor in the one room that hasn't fallen off the side of the house yet. And
Oh,
it's weird.
and watch out for the red clay that's going to be in your bathtub.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I will never forget that scene. Like, so again, went and saw the movie in the theater, and it wasn't a packed house, but there was a few other people in there with us. And I remember there was two moments in the film that got a reaction from the crowd. And when the faucet turned on and the red clay came out of the faucet, I remember like up behind me, someone was like, "Oh!" Like the whole time that it was that way, they were just making a weird noise. And then of course everyone in the theater started laughing because they were just shocked by this clay coming out of there. So yeah, I hate that scene too.
I gotta say, the red really pops in this movie, and I love the effect of it on the snow. Like it looks gorgeous. Like
Mhm.
when it's snowing and the clay comes up. Like yeah, it's supposed to look like blood and be gross. That's why it's called Crimson Peak.
Mhm.
But like even the gross whatever's going on down there in the basement or whatever that bottom floor is, like that is like as red can be. Like
Mhm.
I don't know if I've ever seen the color red that red.
Right, it's almost reminiscent of early Tim Burton films because Tim
Mhm.
Burton loves his red as well, and I even call it Tim Burton red. I'm like, yep, there it is, and it kind of, which again, kind of a gothic storyteller when he's not with Disney. Um, so yeah, he's definitely got this red that's Guillermo del Toro red. It's very kind of akin to that of like There it is. Because again, like I said, one of my favorite things about this movie is it's precisely stylized. There is nothing about this film that isn't done with precision as far as the stylization goes.
And you know what's interesting is we talk about the budget and how it's a bigger budget than most movies because he was trying to make. Of course, he always makes a stylized movie, but he's trying to make a well-made production of what he's trying to do. He pitched this script. Of course, he's constantly trying to make At the Mountain of Madness, and I hope that some streaming service out there just gives him the money to do it finally, and a Count of Monte Cristo script, which I think he had been working on since the 90s when he was trying to make his money back from Kronos. And they're like, we'll do this one. This one seems like we can afford to make this one. So is entering this was the cheaper budget of the three films.
Mhm.
And originally he wasn't going to direct this. They wanted him to just produce it.
Mhm. I'm glad he did direct it though, because I think it could have easily, very easily, turned into a hot mess.
Oh yeah.
Like this film can unravel real quick. It could have. It could have unraveled really quick and turned into a disaster almost. Because there's so much going on and what's not said that Guillermo del Toro captures so well that I don't know if someone else could have gotten the essence of what the film's really about that Guillermo del Toro did.
Yeah, I think under a less skilled filmmaker, I think the plot would have unraveled itself. And if you don't have good enough actors, they're not going to sell it either.
Hmm. Agreed, agreed. And what's also kind of interesting is talking, kind of going back to the budget, is they didn't want to do a whole lot of CGI. They wanted to do as much practicals as they could, and that's also a Guillermo del Toro thing. He likes to do a lot of practicals, a lot of man in suit. And so the ghosts were actually actors that
As
they.
Doug Jones.
Yep, it was Doug. I actually wrote that as like the ghosts were created in camera, meaning they were actual people instead of CGI. And one of them is Del Toro standby Doug Jones. Yeah. So Doug Jones is, he's the one of. I think he's one or two of the ghosts throughout the film,
He's
and
bo- he's both Edith's mom and he's
Lady Sharp, I think.
Lady Sharp, yes.
Yeah. So it's already doing the practicals, which makes those ghosts seem so much more real. And of course, it's CGI'd over the practical, like man in suit. But because there's that already fluid motion of a human doing it and not a robot, it sells so much better. And like you were saying earlier, the whole house was built purposely. There was nothing in there that was like reused or recycled or anything like that. Everything in that house was like, this is specific for this film, for this house. And so that kind of wastes your budget a little bit, but I'm so glad that he did that because it makes it so unique.
And it makes the house a character. Like that house feels alive, not just because there's ghosts in it, but just
Hmm.
because of how amazing it looks, and you know that someone built that with their hands. Like that's not to discredit any graphic visual effects people that create things with the computers, because we can do things now with computers that we could never have done even 10, 15 years
Oh yeah.
ago.
Hmm.
But like just seeing that and then watching it on the best TV you can watch and a good print, and you like see every layer of production design and know that everything down to the tile, Del Toro was like, no, we got to make it look like this. It's got to be right here. This is where I'm setting up the shot.
Hmm. This house feels like the Overlook.
Oh, totally.
Hmm. And so again, one of the films that was the inspiration was The Shining, and this house is the Overlook. Like that's exactly like that when she walks through the door and we see this house crumbling around them, but yet how excited Thomas Sharp is to be home in this weird falling down ancestral home that he almost becomes another person when he walks through the door. He almost gets giddy. Like even though he's describing it of like, yeah, we got to redo the roof, and yeah, the clay's coming up through the floor, and watch out, it'll get you. This is home. Like this is the great home, and it's like he almost takes on a different personality, and it's almost like the house itself is manipulating him to be that way, to do those things. And the house is alive. Even without the ghost, the house itself is alive. It's its own, like you said, it's its own character. And it's one of those few times that the set becomes just as important. And it really does feel like the Overlook.
So I feel like we got to talk about Charlie Hunnam a little bit because even though it's a
Thank you for
small
saying
role,
his name right, because I
um,
can't.
I I don't typically like him as an actor, but I think he is far more interesting as a character actor than he is a leading man, and I think this happens a lot of time with handsome actors. They want to put them as a leading man, but really that's not their wheelhouse as a performer. Like Colin Farrell, like he's not really a leading man. He's more of like give me some weird role to be in and let me do my thing. I like him, but like he was fine in Sons of Anarchy, and he was fine to be the lead in Pacific Rim, even though he's not the most interesting character in that movie to me. Like I much prefer Idris Elba and the actress playing the female lead in
Mhm,
Pacific Rim,
mhm.
but like he's fine here, and I think even and apparently he decided to take the role because Del Toro said, "Well, you're going to be the damsel in distress in this movie."
Yeah. So I feel like this actor, I can never say his name right, so thank you for saying it right a minute ago. So, okay, I mean this in a good way. I don't mean this to be negative, but this is just my perspective on it. He's one of those actors that he's just as good as everybody else if they rise him up to the bar that they're at. I don't think that he'll ever purposely rise himself up, and I don't think it's because he's a bad actor. Like, please don't think that I'm like, oh, you're crap. That's not what I'm saying here. But because everyone in this film was so good that they forced him to be on our level. Like, you have to be on our level, bro. Like, you're in a scene with me, you have to be on my level. And I think that this really helped him because you're right. This character is a little bit different from what I've seen him in the past. You know, where you can kind of see all sorts of different things floating along the surface of his characters. You can see the wheels turning in his mind and him making decisions as a character throughout this whole film. And I think it's because he's playing opposite of some powerhouses in the scenes that he's in. And so it's bringing him up. And that really helps him in this movie. And again, this is not a bash on this actor. I don't think he's a bad actor, not at all. But it just forces him to be the absolute best that he is.
Well, I mean, actors feed off energy of what other
Mhm.
actors are giving them in a scene, and if you're acting opposite Tom Hiddleston and Jessica Chastain and Mia Wachowski, you're gonna have to bring up your game because these are extremely talented actors. And I think there's lots of different styles of performers, just like actors and directors. There are some who can rise above the material that's given to them just because they are naturally gifted and talented, that they will bring more than what's there. And then there are
Mhm.
others that the material has to be good or you're not going to see it.
Yes. Agreed.
And there are actors that are not versatile, and that's okay. There are certain actors that doesn't make them bad actors.
Mhm.
Everybody cannot be Gary Oldman or Kate
Mhm.
Winslet or Meryl Streep.
Mhm.
There are some actors that are only particularly type of roles that work for them as performers, and that's fine. I mean, Keanu Reeves has found that groove. I mean, like, I'm not going to say Keanu Reeves is a bad actor, but I'm not going to say he's a good actor either.
Mhm.
But he's good at what he can do.
Hey, you know what? I think Keanu Reeves is a top-notch dude. I think he's a fine actor. But you're exactly right. Keanu Reeves is gonna bring you Keanu Reeves, and it's gonna be great, and I'm gonna love it. But no, he's never gonna be. Uh, ugh. Uh, everybody knows what I mean. You're right. Keanu Reeves is a prime example of, you're getting what you're getting, and you're gonna like it, and we all have signed on for it, and yeah, I'm here for it.
And
So
apparently
here,
he's an incredibly nice person, and apparently does not even use his celebrity status to push things. Apparently, I'm going off topic just a minute, just to reiterate that I mean no disrespect to Keanu Reeves. I love Keanu Reeves. Apparently, he was going out to dinner with some people. I don't know if they were producers or marketing team, people who aren't famous, people you wouldn't recognize if you saw them. They went to like 4 or 5 different restaurants. Every restaurant was telling them, "Oh, we don't have any available tables." And like Keanu was just taking it at face value. Like, "Okay, you don't have any available." Well, they go to one restaurant and they tell them that, and apparently Parker Posey was at the restaurant, noticed Keanu, and was like, "Hey, Keanu!" And then apparently the maitre d' or hostess was like, "Oh wait, I think a table came
yes, yes,
open."
yes. Mm-hmm.
Like, but he wasn't like, "Well, I'm Keanu Reeves. Why isn't there a table?" You know? So I that just shows you how nice of a human being he is, that he doesn't like he takes what you tell him at face value instead of demanding things just because he's rich and famous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I've heard nothing but excellent things about Keanu Reeves, but this isn't a Keanu Reeves film, so I'm going to try to stay on topic because I'll get off on a diatribe too about how much I love Keanu Reeves. So I I do. I love Keanu. Oh,
I'm
okay.
I'm not sure. This is not another actor I really want to get too much into his performance, but I just appreciate him on screen, even though he usually plays caricatures. I think his name is Bud Gorman. He plays the private eye Jim Beaver
I
hires.
love him. I love him. Okay, so what I know him from and what I know him from best is a show called Turn.
Oh,
It came on AMC and it's about the spies of the American Revolution. And he played one of the generals or something like that in the British Army that sets up in the town that the spy comes from. And he is so good in that show, like it's criminal how good he is in that show. And I also love that Guillermo del Toro likes working with him because he's been in a couple other Guillermo del Toro movies. And he is such a little caricature, squirrely, bendy, weird little dude, and I just love him. I love him. I think he's an amazing actor, and I know how you just like I don't want to spend too much time talking about him, and then I'm like, wait, yes, we do. I love him. I think he's spectacular, and every time I see him in something, I'm like, hey, there he is. I love that guy, and I can never remember his name, but I just know I like him, and I'm glad he's in this movie, and I wish he had more screen time.
yeah. I want the private eye movie with him. Like
That'd be so good.
whatever character he's playing, he gives it 100%. Even if it's
Mm-hmm.
just a small nothing role like this, like he's just there for exposition, really, to get the plot moving. But
Yeah.
he plays it perfectly like a seedy private eye. He's like, oh, you don't want to read that right here in public. You want to read that to yourself in private.
Hmm. Yeah, like he's in maybe a whole 5 minutes of the movie total screen time, but he's a standout for me. I really like him. Like he's just this little weird, squirrely dude who plays that little private eye spectacularly. And I think Guillermo del Toro should come up with the sequel, which is just the private eye running around Buffalo, figuring out more squirrely stuff about more squirrely people.
The seedy life of Buffalo, New York, which his new movie that's out right now apparently takes place in Buffalo, New York as well.
That's interesting.
Which is I don't think it's a private eye story, but it is very noir esque.
Oh yes, I know which one you're talking about. It looks great. We haven't gone to see it yet. I don't even know if it's out. Did it come out already?
Yeah, it came out the same weekend as Spider-Man No Way From Home. Knock on wood that the weather is permitting because there's supposed to be like rain today, though it hasn't started yet. I'm
Mhm.
gonna go try and see it tonight because yeah, I'm always and it's. I mean, I haven't seen Carol, but apparently a lot of film people I know are excited about the Carol reunion of Kate Blanchett and Rooney Mara, even though I don't think they're gonna have any scenes together. But it's apparently a remake, but it's a noir set at a carnival, which that's cool, and just all the actors he got for this movie, and Kate Blanchett's playing a femme fatale. Okay, sign me up.
Yeah, right. I love her. Mm.
So I'm excited about that movie. I was gonna ask you later about if you were excited about it, but we can already say we're excited for a new Guillermo del Toro movie that's out in theaters that no one's seeing.
Yeah, no, I'm usually always excited about a Guillermo del Toro movie. So yeah, we saw the trailer the other night. We were flipping. I can't remember what we were on. We were flipping through channels, and it came on, and we are like, oh, that looks really good because I'd seen something about it on the internet, but not really the trailer. And that's the first time I actually saw the trailer, and I was like, oh, that looks really interesting. So we'll probably end up going to see it.
I mean, it may be on streaming by next month, maybe, depending on. But, I'm not faulting anyone for not going to see it because of, it's an up and down process, 3 years
Hmm.
of this. But it's just a shame when you see like everyone and their mom, which I don't, begrudge. I went and saw it too. But, everyone apparently was like, well, Spider Man's worth getting killed for, but these other movies, I can wait.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna get I could get Omicron from Spider Man, but only Spider Man.
Um, is there anything else you want to talk about this movie before we talk about how to rank it?
Let me see. Okay, so I have a quote from Stephen King. I'm gonna pre-warn all the listeners out there. There is an F bomb in the quote, so if you don't like curse words, shield your ears now. But I'm gonna quote Stephen Queen. Stephen Queen. That's not a person, but Stephen King. He absolutely loved the film, and he says it's in his top 13 favorite horror films,
Wow.
which is impressive. And he says, gorgeous and fucking terrifying. Crimson Peak electrified me in the same way that Sam Raimi's Evil Dead electrified me when I saw it for the first time way back in the day. So dang. So yeah,
You,
when the king of horror is like, yep, this is it. This is the movie. Go and see it. That's it.
yeah, I mean, and I bet Guillermo was delighted as heck to get such a rave from Stephen King because he's a Stephen King fan. He wants to do Pet Cemetery again if that will ever happen, but he apparently really likes that story.
Guillermo
And
del Toro does.
mhm.
I'm here for it. Reboot it right now.
Yeah, apparently nobody liked the newer version that just came out a couple of years ago, so
It wasn't bad. It just wasn't spectacular. Like that was the deal. Is I didn't hate it at all, but I also didn't love it at all. Again, diatribing on a movie that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But yeah, I it didn't capture the same essence that the original from what was it, the late 80s, early 90s
mhm.
captured. Yeah.
And
Mm.
that's a rare genre film for that era that was directed by a woman, the original Pet Cemetery.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Well, that brings me to another point about this film, is that this film is very female driven. This is a very female driven film. It's all taken from Edith's perspective. The probably the strongest character in the film, as far as like driving force, is Lucille. Like she
Oh
makes all
yeah.
the calls. She controls everything. She's the one who even kills Edith's dad to set up the success. So she's like, we need their money. So how we're gonna do it is we're gonna get it. And I don't care what we have to go through. I'm gonna kill her dad if that's what it takes. And like, dude, that's what it takes. So these two really strong, driven female characters, and I think Guillermo del Toro does that fairly well as far as like strong female characters. I don't know if I would go so far as to say his movies are female driven. This one is, but his female characters usually are pretty strong characters. They're not usually like flat one dimensional characters. They usually have quite a bit going on, which is something I appreciate because in Hollywood that hasn't always been the case either. That most of the women are dumb, airheaded, idiot bimbos, especially in gothic horror. You know, they're just there to be pretty and like swoon, where this is the opposite of that. Edith, even though she's naive, she doesn't swoon. She's not, she's level headed. She's a strong girl. And yeah, she's naive. She just doesn't know the way of the world. And she's not, she may be naive, but she's not dumb, if that makes
Ex-
any sense.
Totally. She's only naive by not
Knowing the
living long
world.
enough of a life and being a little bit sheltered and just not experiencing things. She's not dumb, and she doesn't even swoon over
Mm-mm.
Thomas Sharp. It's like a progression of falling in love. Like, because at first she's just like, "Oh, okay, you're handsome and you're a typical dude. I don't what okay, whatever." It takes time, like, to build that. Like, he's got to work extra hard to get that con going on her, and then he actually falls in love with her.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's something really almost beautiful about this film is to see the two of them, Edith and Thomas, fall in love with each other in this film, but in completely different ways and at different times in the movie. There's this, you can kind of see Edith, like Edith, of course, falls in love with him when he's there after her father's death. Like he's kind of the rock that she leans on, and then she almost, it almost feels like she marries him out of, I wouldn't say obligation, but she knows like this man's been here for me. This is the guy. This is my guy. And then you can kind of see it over time. Tom Hiddleston like falling in love with her, um, as they're there, even in this weird fun house that they live in. And so, that's really kind of unique, that storyline between the Edith and Thomas and how they're all like falling in love, and she still stands on her own. Like Edith never gives in to the bullshit. She fights all the way to the end. I mean, hell, that's the only reason she's like one of the few people that live in the movie is because she's like, I'm gonna fight you. Even with my broken leg, I'm gonna fight you. Like I love you, but I'm gonna fight you.
Yep. Yeah, and like she figures everything out. She finds out she's getting poisoned, so she stops eating and drinking, and like she's like, "No, like you guys are doing some messed up stuff and it's
Hmm.
weird and
And
gross." And
they are doing some messed up stuff. Like, whoa, the flowers in the attic in this one.
mhm.
Dang. So I was told you earlier that there was two moments in the movie that people had like an audible reaction when I went and saw it. One was when the faucet turned on and the red water was coming out. The other one was when Edith walks in on the brother and sister like feeling each other up and making out. And I just remember, I don't know if it was the same person or what, but someone behind me was like, "Ooh!" It was just another sound. It wasn't even a "ooh, girl." It was just "oh." Like they
And I
just
mean,
figured it out too.
is it just that like that just confirms it cuz I feel like that's already kind of set up in the movie that they're like lovers too, not just siblings.
Yeah, you kind of almost feel it even before there's a scene back before they're still in Buffalo, and Jessica Chastain's wearing the ring, and Thomas Hiddleston comes up to her, is like, "Okay, give me the ring. It's time for my power play." And she kind of gets in his face, and she's like, "Whatever happens, just remember this is my ring." And it almost seems like even though Mom left it to me, it's my ring in the sense of like you always give it back to me because I belong to you and you belong to me. Like there's that kind of like undertone as well as like the reason it's my ring is not only because Mom left it to me, it's because you keep giving it back to me. That weird, like already before we get back to London or England, we already are kind of like, what's going on with this brother and sister? They're weird.
Well, and you kind of see like her judging and jealousy just without her saying anything at that party scene where she's playing the piano and seeing them dance and talk to each other. Like the glare she gives are like worth 1,000 words
Hmm.
without even speaking.
Yeah. I think that Jessica Chastain plays this role beautifully. I think you're right. I think it's kind of I wouldn't call it a smaller role. I'm wondering if we lose some of it in editing. Like there was just
Hmm.
more there, and then we just kind of lost it in editing. But so, what I like so much about Jessica Chastain's performance in this film is that it's all what she doesn't say, because she says it all without saying anything. And all of these little like looks and nudges and glances and glares that she does, they're perfect. And that is one of those great scenes where you can just tell if she could just get up and run across a room and choke Edith, she would. She would do it right then and there. She would just get up and run across the room and just choke her in front of everyone.
And I mean that's why she wants to kill, like they've killed all these other previous women that he's married for their money. But, like, she even takes more glee in wanting to kill Edith because she's like, "Well, none of the other ones slept with him."
Mhm. Mhm. And he hadn't fallen in love with any of the other ones. The other ones were
Mhm.
all a game. And I think, we see him slowly falling in love with her, but that means everyone else sees it too. So his sister is watching him fall in love with Edith while she's desperately still trying to cling on to him throughout this as well.
Well, and that's why she has that freak out with the breakfast when they come back from after spending the night at that in that room at the post office,
Mhm. Mhm. Oh
because
my
she
god.
knows what happens without even
Oh
knowing
yeah,
it
she knows
happened.
instantly. Yeah, as soon as she said, "Well, we got snowed in," I mean, she knows. She's like, "Uh-oh, I wasn't there to stop this from happening. I know what happened." Because at this point, she already knows her brother's in love with her, and so yeah, she flips. And that's when everything goes downhill. From that moment on, it's instantly like Jessica Chastain has to now get rid of Edith, and because I think even the next scene, she's saying, "Okay, as soon as that paperwork gets here, you have to sign the paperwork. You're going to have to sign that paperwork. That gives us the ownership of your family fortune or whatever it is, or like you agree to get the family fortune." And so, like, as soon as that's there, that scene where Jessica Chastain is like, "Sign that paper," and she gets so ugly so fast of like, "You better sign that damn paper. I'm going to chase you through this house with a knife. Sign the damn paper."
So that leads me to a silly question. Do we think the good doctor, Charlie Hunnam, is still friend zoned after the end of this movie?
I don't know. I think their relationship's going to be different than it was before. Like it has to be. Like, hey, you ran off to England and you married a weirdo, and then he stabbed me, and they tried to kill you, and then in turn try to kill me, and then try to kill you again, and then you had a ghost help you kill her with a shovel. I don't know if things will ever go back to being the same as they were before. I I don't know if I'd go so far as to say that it's friend zone, but I think that they might have a different relationship. I don't know if it's a romantic one that they might
So
have
I don't think she had those feelings for him. He had those feelings for
for
her.
her.
Uh,
Mm.
but do you think like now he's like, I'm just gonna be your friend now, or at least just a close relationship. I don't know if I want to be in love with you anymore.
Yeah, yeah, right. I don't know. There's a lot that happens, in the last 10 minutes of this movie, and there's no telling. Like, there's no telling if he's just like, "I'm gonna get your ass back to Buffalo," and then bye. Like, I don't ever want to see you again. Because that kind of almost would be my feeling of like, look, I came back to get you, and then they straight up stabbed me, and then like things got really, really, really weird. Like, I'm glad you're okay. I'm gonna be okay, but I don't want to see you again. Like bye. So I don't know. Like it can go many different ways of like we fell in love on our way back to Buffalo, or as soon as we get off this train, you're going your way and I'm going mine. I don't know. Hmm.
Yeah, I was just wondering because I'm like, man, he is going above and beyond for the friend zone guy. But
Sure, yeah, like dude, going all the way to England and then like walking through the door as Edith has just been like tossed off the balcony or the flipped over the rail of the staircase. It's like, oh yeah, we you broke your ankle, and then they're all like Jessica Chastain and Tom Hiddleston are like, she just fell. Don't know what happened. Mm,
but
mm,
I like that he already knows something's up, even though he's trying to act like he's just there out of goodwill and oh, I heard I needed to. I forget what excuse of how he ended up there, but like he's trying to play it like he doesn't know what's going on, even though he knows.
mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very interesting scene because I think I think Lucille knows instantly. That's why she's still trying to cover it. She's like, "Oh no, she just fell. She fell down the stairs." Because Tom Hiddleston doesn't say hardly anything in that scene because he while he may be witty and charming, he may also be dull in some regards. Of like, I don't know how to play this, so I'm going to let Lucille do this because I'm not 100% sure what's going on right now. Because Lucille knows instantly. Like when he walks through the door, she's like, "Okay, we now have to play this better because he's on to us now. And if he's on to us, who else could be on to us?" So she instantly knows, where I don't know if Thomas knows yet. I don't think he figures it out until after Jessica Chastain stabs him. She's like, oh.
Okay, this is how we're playing it. Okay.
Oh, okay, cool. We're stabbing people. Got it. Got it. Okay.
Well, if there's nothing else we want to bring up about the movie, let's go ahead and see how you want to rank this.
Okay.
So
Now,
for
and
the
we're ranking this out of all of Guillermo del Toro's works. Yeah.
No, we're just gonna give it a
Oh,
ranking. I mean, if you want to place it somewhere, I mean, I would probably put it right in the middle. I wouldn't put it like in my personal favorites, but it's
mm,
definitely not, in my opinion, his weakest film because there's just so much expertise and craftsmanship involved in this movie. And I think the actors also elevate this material.
mm-hmm,
So for the personal rankings of Guillermo del Toro films, we have if you love this movie, if you think it's perfection or at least a knock out of the park, it's fantastical because he lives in a fantastical world usually in his films. If you think this is a pretty entertaining film, it's enjoyable, it hits its marks, it does what it's supposed to do, and because he loves monsters so much, it's a delightful creature feature. If you think this is obscure or only for fans of Del Toro or cinephiles, we give it a deep dive. If you think it's a little meandering, mediocre, doesn't quite live up to what it was supposed to do, we say creatures over the he was too in love with the creatures instead of the story. And then if it's terrible, it's just a horrible misfire. It's a mess. And because he's such a H.P. Lovecraft fan, and there's not as much Lovecraftian influence in this as I would have thought from him, especially being the genre. But
mm-hmm.
because he's such a fan of Lovecraft, we say Cthulhu wrecks all. If it's bad.
Cthulhu Rexall. That's pretty good. I'm going to go with delightful creature feature. I'm not going to go with the very top ranking because, again, I do love this film. I don't want anyone to think, oh man, I don't like it. I do. I really like it. I do think that there are times that this movie misses the mark, and it's not in acting. It's not in stylized. It's everything that kind of went into putting the film out for consumption is what missed the mark. The trailer was misleading. They filmed it, and then I think when they if they would have released it right after it was finished filming, it might have done a little bit different. but they didn't release it till the following Halloween. And I just think there was a disconnect between that because I remember there being talk about him making this gothic film when it was being filmed. And then we didn't hear anything about it. And then it was like, oh, yeah, Crimson Peak. Remember that? We were kind of talking about it once upon a time. And so I just think that it missed its mark in getting out there to the public.
I'm also giving it a delightful creature feature. Like I said, I think it's somewhere in the middle for me as far as his overall movies. I don't think he's really made a bad movie yet, in my opinion. I even
Mm-hmm.
enjoy Mimic for what it is, even though I
Mm-hmm.
know that, in my opinion, is his weakest film. I think there's a little bit more story wise going on here than in something like Pacific Rim, even though that's just a delight to watch from beginning to end, or even Blade 2 or the first Hellboy, even though maybe the first Hellboy gets just a notch above just because it's Ron Perlman cast perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I agree with you. I mean, I understand why they went for an October release because they're like, oh, it's a spooky movie right around Halloween. But maybe this would have played better as like a February release, like because it's
Mm-hmm.
a winter spooky movie, but it's a gothic romance. So it oddly might have played better if it was released around that time of the year, like early, like in the winter instead of like knee deep in the fall when we want like traditional spooky movies. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think maybe the story, like I think there might, like you said, not just in Jessica Chastain's performance and character, but I think maybe there's like a cut of this movie that might be missing some of the story beats that would make the story a little bit stronger. Because I think as well crafted and well made as that movie is, I think that's a little bit, and it could just be that that's just on the nose of what's going on, and there's not
Sure.
anything complicated going on here. But I think if there is a weak part, that's where it is in the script, and I suspect that there's just stuff from the cutting floor that didn't make it in the movie that could have made it a stronger film. But I think it's production designs and value and the acting and just everything made into it. You can't. I mean, people have your opinions. Everything's subjective, but I think if you like Del Toro or you like anything, even if you're a horror fan and this isn't quite your scene, if you're a fan of this filmmaker and this genre, then you're gonna like this movie just
Mm-hmm.
because of how well made it is.
Yeah, it's a beautiful film. That's what I always tell people. When if I see somebody online who's like, "Hey, what's the deal with this movie Crimson Peak?" Because it's still kind of slowly gaining steam, especially with it being on Netflix. Because it's kind of the same thing. Like even Netflix doesn't quite know what to do with it, and I'll see someone throw it out there like, "Is this movie spooky?" I'm like, "No, it's not. But it's really good." And I think you're right. I think there is something amiss with the storytelling in the sense of it's very, I hate to say face value because there's a lot going on, but at the same time there's not a lot going on. It's very strange how, it's a straight cut story of girl falls in love with rich guy, well, supposedly once was rich guy, who just wants her for her money, takes her back home, they're trying to kill her, take her money. That's the entire plot. I mean, really, that's the whole thing. And we sit there for 2 hours of that. And so, I think there is some things missing in that storytelling. However, it's such a well crafted movie. Like visually, I think ooh, this is gonna be a bold statement. I think it might be in my top five Guillermo del Toro's visual movies.
Oh, for sure. If we're talking on visuals alone, yeah, it's got to be up there.
Like the costumes are beyond sumptuous. Like they are everyone, even the men, like their costumes are they actually kind of like blow me away how good they are because that was my first huge takeaway was like the first time we see grown Edith in this kind of like mustard satin dress. That's nothing like super duper spectacular. It would have fit in with her station in life, but it's just so good. And the costumes just get better and better and better. Like even Jessica Chastain's costumes and Tom Hiddleston's costumes, they're perfect, but they're also older. And they even say that in the film of like, did you see his tux or his suit? It's well made, but it's older, but it's been tailored to fit him. I think all the gowns that Jessica Chastain wears were her mother's that have been tailored for her because they don't look the same as Edith. Edith is more of a early Edwardian look, where Jessica Chastain's costumes are that kind of mid to late Victorian look. And if you're paying attention, you see it. And that's one of the things I think this movie is so visually driven that I'm like, go watch it. Just put it on Netflix and watch it. You're gonna
Do
like
you
it.
do you think his suits are his dad's or maybe even his grandfather, the generation before that did have the money? Because they talked about his dad squandering the family
Fortune.
fortune.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something, from the home, be it his dad's or his granddad's. His suits are probably from the early to late or early to mid Victorian, so it wouldn't be out of the suggestion that they could be his grandfather's suits.
Another movie I forgot to mention that Del Toro references as far as gothic romance goes is Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca is another one.
I haven't seen that, so I don't have a frame of reference. I know, shame on me, but as someone who doesn't have a frame of reference, like I can't really comment on that if that you know makes sense.
Well, I don't know your relationship with Hitchcock and like what type of Hitchcock films you like. It is a really well made, well shot film, and you've got Laurence Olivier who was really good at those type of roles.
Hmm.
And it was Hitchcock's first American film, and I believe it's his only film that was nominated for Best Picture.
Well, I'm gonna have to find it and watch it because I do like Alfred Hitchcock. Like one of my favorite films, period, is North by Northwest. I also love Rear Window. I love The Birds, like kind of the big classic Alfred Hitchcock. I love Vertigo. Vertigo is another one that I really like. That's kind of one of those weird, understated, like what the hell is happening. But yeah, I like Alfred Hitchcock.
Well, they even made Rebecca, but I don't think anyone saw it. It's on Netflix, and probably less people are gonna watch it now because it has Army Hammer in it.
Ooh, ooh, okay. Hmm.
But
They made a
Lily
choice.
James plays the title role in the remake.
Mm,
Yeah,
I
and
do like
it's
her.
directed by it's a British filmmaker named Ben Wheatley. Does a lot of horror films. He's even directed a few Doctor Who episodes.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Give
the
me the clue.
original Rebecca's worth a watch. Now, we already talked about Nightmare Alley, which is currently out, but Guillermo del Toro also has another movie coming out that's supposed to come out sometime this year on Netflix. We're we're getting two versions of this movie, one for Disney, one for Netflix. But Guillermo del Toro is doing an adaptation of Pinocchio.
Mm. Hmm. Hmm. Okay. I'm here for it though. I think I'm here for it. It'll be interesting to see what he does because he is a guy who loves practical effects. And I think that's really where this movie is going to shine. So I hope he doesn't rely too much on like CGI for this, especially in the Disney version. I have thoughts about Disney, as you can tell. Like I just
Yeah,
hope that
that
it doesn't get washed out in CG effects, because that's usually when things go amiss for me. Is when you've lost your story for the CGI telling. So it'll be interesting. I'm here for it though because I do like the story of Pinocchio, and I think if anyone's gonna kind of mount this whimsical world, might as well be Guillermo del Toro.
well, you may have even more thoughts with the Disney version because it's Robert Zemeckis doing it as a motion capture film.
Well,
And
I don't think I'll hate that totally. I'll find out.
You'll find out. I mean, Tom Hanks is Geppetto in that version, but I think Del Toro has already stated that his version is going to lean more towards the source material, the novel. And I'm sure that there's going to be as much practical effects as he can put in puppetry. And
Mhm.
I think I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the Zemeckis version will be kind of a ode to the animated film, which is oddly a much darker and more interesting Disney film than most Disney films. But Walt Disney, when he
Agreed.
was alive, made some really
Weird
strange
stuff.
choices. Yeah, but yeah, I'm all for Del Toro, and he's even akin that Pinocchio is very similar to the story of Frankenstein. So I'm sure he's going to go more into the horror elements of the story, and it'll still be whimsical, but I think he's going to give it a creepier vibe than what most people would associate Pinocchio with.
But I'm like I said, I think it will be interesting because I think Pinocchio, as far as like an idea, is kind of out there. Like a little wooden boy or a doll, a marionette puppet that comes to life. That's already kind of like, well, damn, that's intense. So the story's already kind of leading itself to this really weird world that Guillermo del Toro finds himself in so often. But I'm okay with this. I'm okay with this.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
think I think it's going to be an interesting. It's not going to be boring, even if we don't like it. It's not going to be boring, and it's going to lean very much into those fairy tale aspects. And I mean, a lot of people associate Del Toro with monsters, but really, what he really his wheelhouse is just folklore and fairy tales. Like he's very much in a keen of keeping that culture of storytelling alive.
Hmm. Agreed. Yeah.
Like, if you like Tim Burton and Jim Henson, I think that or Terry Gilliam, then I think Guillermo del Toro is another person that's gonna be in your wheelhouse. If for some reason you haven't seen any of his movies that he's been making for nearly 30 years.
Yeah. No, you're right. I think they're all kind of lumped together as far as like stylization. You could even skirt the edge with Frank Oz getting in there just a little bit. Like he's right on the edge of that group. Frank Oz could just like sneak in there. But I think that that's a good company to be in. I think that's
I
a good little, especially Terry. Thank you for adding Terry Gilliam in there. I
I
love
would
him.
also
He's weird.
add French filmmaker Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who did Amelie. That's probably his
Okay.
most famous movie, is kind of in that sort of realm. Yeah, I love Terry Gilliam. I wish he would quit being old man yelling at cloud and just saying things to upset people. Maybe just quietly do theater or whatever he wants to do at 81, but quit saying things to make people mad and saying things you don't understand.
Well, everyone goes a little bit wacko sometimes. And I think he's
Just
always been a little bit wacko. And I think maybe we've taken that plunge off the edge.
Yeah, maybe so. Well, Samantha, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking this movie. And I'm glad that you genuinely really like it and weren't just like, okay, well, I'll talk it if you need someone to talk about it. But so, thank you.
No, I really do enjoy this film. Again, my suggestion is if you haven't seen it, watch it. Just stream it on Netflix and watch it. It's worth the watch. It's really good. It's actually really good. I do really like it. So watch it. Thank you so much for having me back and let me ramble on for almost an hour and a half about movies and Guillermo del Toro and great films. And I'm always happy to spin a yarn about movies.
Well, and I'm glad to have you and other guests that I have that are willing to just rant and just gush about a movie they love and talk about movies as much as I do. So when I'm around regular people who don't care about movies, they're like, "Can you talk about something else?" I'm like, "Yeah, but real life stuff's boring. I don't care."
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about something else, but why?
Exactly. Is there anything you want to plug, or if you want to like say, hey, if you want to follow me on social media, you can, but you don't have to give out that information if you're not comfortable with it.
I mean, I'm kind of a boring person, so I'm out there on social media. Like I've got an Instagram and Facebook, and I think that's it. Like I kind of peaked with those two. I'm officially an old person. But I kind of live a boring life. I post a lot about like cats. So if you want to find me, I'm on Insta, Sammy Davis Jr.'s Jr. So you can follow me on Instagram. So yeah, you can find me and follow me and see pictures of my adorable cats because I post them like all the time. I have nothing coming up really. Well, I do have one thing I will plug. Coming up in the summer, I'm going to be directing The Tempest at Mount
Ooh.
View College. It's going to be an outdoor Shakespeare at the fountain. That's what we call it there. We have a big outdoor space with a big fountain. So if anybody's interested in auditioning or wanting to come see the show, find me on that Instagram at Sammy Davis Jr.'s Jr. And I can give you more information about that. So that's my only plug is come see some theater, enjoy yourself. That's it.
Oh wow. Yeah, talk about a fantastical show. Yeah. And I've never seen the Julie Taymor version that she directed. Have you?
I have. I last time I saw it was streaming free on YouTube. So if ever you like, got nothing going on, you want to watch it. Last time I looked it up, it was streaming on YouTube. Mm, mm, okay, it's not bad. There was a lot of choices made. The characterization is fun. The acting is fun. I'm not the biggest fan of the overall cinematography. It's kind of jumpy. Like it's trying to be whimsical, but it just feels like busy and hurried and like there's a lot of like we're running with purpose and but I'm going to film you from the side and it's going to be kind of jumpy and I just it feels exhausting to a certain point. Like just hold the camera steady and be still and film an actor. You don't have to give me all this frenetic energy because after like an hour and a half of that, I'm like, okay, I get it. Stop wiggling. I, that sounds so terrible, but that's my problem with it. Is there's just a lot of like unnecessary frenetic movement. That's I get what you were going with because you're kind of like showing me the magic and the this need to get off the island because now you're stranded, but it just feels a little overdone. Like it doesn't quite fit the magic. It feels more frantic and frenetic than whimsical. But the acting is good. Like the guy that plays Caliban, I don't know
Is that
why I can't remember.
Digimon Hughes?
Yes,
I
yeah,
forget how
I
to
know
say his last name, but yeah, he's incredible.
he is so good. He is so good. And Alfred Molina is in it. I think he plays Stefano. And then Russell Brand's in it as Trinculo, and they actually play really well together as the two clowns. It's not a bad film. It isn't. Like the way I was just talking about, like, it's not very good. It's just there was choices made and you made a choice and it just wasn't the right one. So that's that.
Yeah. That's a shame though because that's another filmmaker you could put in this company. I think she definitely has that kind of visual eye, but I think sometimes it's touch and go with her, but yeah, it's probably at least not boring even if there's like it doesn't quite make its mark.
Yeah, like I said, the characterization's really there. The actual stylized like the stylization of the island and the people and costumes, like it's there, like visually, it's there. It's just the filming of it, like it's just it. I don't. It doesn't excite me. Like it kind of is frenetic, and then it gets boring. Like it's all this running around crazy, and then it's like run around crazy, and it's like the balance wasn't there as far as like the actual like pacing of the film and the storytelling. I just didn't I didn't enjoy that part of that movie. But I would always say for that one, give it a watch. One because it hasn't been. updated. It's still Shakespearean language, and it's understandable. The Tempest is probably one of his more digestible works as far as like for the layman that may not, like really get into Shakespeare. It's one of the more digestible ones. Give it a go because it is still in the language and the characters are really fun. Like the actors are really great and they're doing an excellent job of being these characters. Like I know I keep bringing this one back. I already said it, but man, Caliban. This is a movie about Caliban. Like forget Prospero. This is a movie about Caliban. He's so good. Steals it. Steals the movie. But anyway, I'm done. We weren't talking about the Tempest.
I'm sorry I brought it up. But
Okay.
thank you so much for coming on, and as always, enjoy the conversation. And you're always welcome back whenever you want to talk something. So thanks for
Well, thank
coming.
you, and I plan to come back then.
Of course. Um, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Stay safe, and thanks again for anyone that's watching or keeps up with our pages on Facebook and Twitter. We'll be back with Guillermo del Toro in 2 weeks with Robbie Fleming to talk about the Best Picture winning film, The Shape of Water. And then next week, we should be talking about Isle of Dogs, and we're going to kind of end another series that we did audios on, not videos of Miyazaki's The Wind Rises. But I'll keep everyone updated on that show if that happens or not. Until then, thanks for watching, and you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and we have a YouTube page which this video is being broadcast on. So thanks for everyone who watches. Thanks for all the people who joined the Facebook group, and thanks for anyone who brings opinions, inputs, or suggestions, and keep doing that. We appreciate it. Have a great day.